welcome to the Emerging Excellence podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us. First of all, thanks so much for taking the time out and welcome to the show.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
Now, many of you, or many of the people listening to this may not know your backstory. So as a quick intro, you're a former professional soccer player, and we'll have to work with soccer for the international audience. Sorry, Matt. I know that's like a sacrilegious sin as English people to call it soccer. But anyway, we'll move on quickly. You played at the top of the game in terms of Premier League soccer for almost over a decade. I'll get you to kind of talk about the specific career. And you've been to clubs like West Ham, Norwich, Wolves, and there's been a whole range, of course, in the mix there as well. And you've now got on to do the commentary side, which is a really interesting leap from sport. I think many players would like to, but I'd imagine not many are very successful in actually doing that, given you only need a few presenters per game, right? So it's very interesting to talk about your career. But where I'd love to start, could you just give us a brief introduction, like what was it like, or how did you navigate that kind of professional soccer or football player? Let's call it football. Sorry, that professional football player experience of yours. How did you get the bug for it, or was there a big decision where you were like, no, I'm going to take this really seriously?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yeah, it was when I was young. I come from both my parents were sports people. They were both England #1 table tennis players, would you believe? So not quite football or soccer, but so they were sportsmen. And so we grew up. I've got an older brother. He played sport, but as a kid, I played everything: football, swimming, athletics, cross country. I did everything. I loved it all. I loved the individual sports a lot because it was just me versus someone else, and you had that psychology of I can trust me. If I wasn't good enough, it was me, and I can work at that. And there was that psychology of psyching people out before races and all that. But football was always my #1, and it got to a point where my body started to change. I started to grow calves, quads, and my athletics coach was like, "You're not a runner anymore. You're a sports person." Because doing the cross country, my legs got bigger. So in the end, it got to a point that I was always going to choose football, but it got to a point that I had to make a decision, and football came out on top. And luckily for me, I managed to work my way up. I did get released at 16 as a kid. Told wasn't good enough, which was a huge disappointment. I was absolutely gutted, but luckily I managed to jump back in a couple of weeks later and got offered a contract at Gillingham, which is where it all started for me.
And it's a really interesting one. We had I think Matthew Layton, if I got the name correct. He is the head of the academy at Swansea Football Club, and he was talking about youth development and the EPPP, or the Elite Player Performance Program, which they've kind of developed at the Premier League. And it's quite a big deal in terms of academies, right? But he made it blindingly obvious that actually 1 in 200 players end up getting to the top of the league. So, and in your case, they obviously got it wrong because some club didn't recognise. So, what was your experience in that space, being a young player in there, and knowing the odds are pretty much stacked against you? Like most of you are going to not make it.
Yeah, it's honestly, it is brutal, especially for a young kid. You're each year that you're there at an academy, you're basically on trial. You each year people get released, all your friends get released, and it's not the end of the road, but you mentally you've got to try and put yourself in a position that you've got to work your hardest. You've got to be there. You've got to be trying to improve, but if you don't make it here, you can try and go somewhere else, because there's so many stories about it. But at the same time, the actual possibility of you actually making it is so slim. So it's a really difficult fine balance to be headstrong and be, no, this is it. This is what I want to do, and I will work and I will make it, to getting to a point that you might not make it, and you've got to decide, right, am I going to be able to keep up schoolwork, and am I going to be doing my extra, my A levels or any sort of BTEC courses while you're actually training in the academy? Because as you said, I think it was like 0.01% make it as a professional footballer. So you've got to have yourself options to have another career.
It's pretty wild, and I can imagine as a young person, it's a very tricky environment. And we're going to touch on mental health later on. And but I can imagine it's rife, right, in terms of the mental health challenge of that pressure, as it were. And I think that's the key topic I want to kind of explore with you in terms of how you think you navigated pressure maybe better than others, because I feel like that's a recurring theme. You've played at the top in terms of the global football. You've also now gone on to like radio and TV, which is also a nerve-wracking experience. You got big studios, millions of people, hanging on whatever word. I can't believe Matt just said that. Like it's
Yeah.
tweeting or whatever, and that's a high pressure environment like the whole time. So I'm interested to know, why do you think you've been able to navigate that piece better than others?
I think I wasn't like that to start with. I think as a kid, I was I wasn't always massively confident in my own ability, I think, and that's something that sort of stayed with me throughout my whole career. I think
Mm,
within football, obviously you have the massive highs, but you also have the big lows, and it's just trying to maintain that balance of,
yeah.
not being too high, not being too take the wins when it comes, but the losses, you've got to try and sort of not let it affect you as much. But for me, as a kid, I was always really young. I wasn't confident in my own ability, and I sort of just slowly got into it. And then I got to a point that I was okay, and then getting released hit me hard. But
Mm,
it's just the people you surround yourself with. I went to Gillingham on trial, and the players there and the coaches there were brilliant with me, and I sort of grew into it and got myself more confident. And obviously, once you start playing games and you start doing well, you breed your own confidence, and that's what happened to me. I then played and done really well, and I got myself in the first team at 17. So I got released at 16. I was playing in the first team in the championship at the time at 17. So a
mm.
year's difference, less than a year's difference. I
Yeah,
was
wow.
actually playing in the first team. So then you just trying to grab onto you don't actually have any pressures. I don't think, as a young player, when you're playing in the first team, you're just full of adrenaline. You've got not got that feeling of, oh, I can't let people down, because you're high on life, really. You're so excited to go out and play. You've got no fear. If you make a mistake, it doesn't matter, because you're young and you're just going for it. Especially for me as an attacking player, you want to take people on. You want to try this, you try that, and I had really good people around me, even in the team, who were like, keep doing it, keep trying. But as you start getting a little bit older, you start feeling the pressure of, right, I need to perform. People are, the
Mm,
expectation levels are there, and you have to
mm.
perform. Whereas as a young kid, you don't feel that. I think it's massively important. You look at players like, for instance, Marcus Rashford. When he come onto the scene, he had no fear and he was flying. He was so quick, so strong, just went straight into no. He had no concerns. He had a couple of seasons like that, and then you start falling into the trap of feeling the pressures of everyone,
Yeah.
the expectations levels of everyone trying to do that. So my experiences are actually built on my own personal experiences in that. So you can start looking back, and I used to visualize and watch clips of me performing well before going into a game,
Got you.
so that I was in a better frame of mind to go into a game, and to have that, not going into it thinking, oh, I didn't play well here last time, and I didn't have a
Yeah.
good game last time. You're just watching videos of you doing something well, scoring goals, making good crosses, that side of things. So you put yourself in a position that you can try and have a positive outcome.
Wow. So like really priming yourself, I think would what Tony Robbins might call something like that. Like that kind of trying to indoctrinate, for want of a better word, to make sure that you're looking at your capability rather than the things which went wrong. Which, because I feel like that's the
Yeah.
really classic thing with sport. I think there's a great quote I read from Alistair Brownlee. I don't think he attributes to somebody else, but he says, "What is sport but just life in fast forward?" And I think it's a really beautiful way to put it, because so much happens. There's so many uncontrollables, right? Because you've got
Yeah.
all your game plan, you've done your training and blah, 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 blah. And then you've got the other team who have spent whatever that
Yeah,
looks
exactly.
like. And I'd love to use your career as a bit of a kind of a story piece for us to kind of navigate and talk about maybe what are some of the transferable skills you found, maybe looking back, maybe you didn't realize at the time that you've taken. So if we went back to Wolves, which was your first, you moved from Gillingham, sorry, went from Gillingham to Wolves. That was your first Premier League club. What was that like when you look back? What was kind of the key or one of the key lessons or kind of takeaways you took from that Wolves experience?
Um, yeah, the Wolves experience was phenomenal for me. As you say, it's my first sort of experience in the Premier League. I think the appetite for actually being in the league, I think because you work your way up in that, that's the pinnacle of domestic football is the Premier
Yeah.
League for me. So you earn your way, you work your way up there, and when you get there, you just want to actually enjoy it, and you want to test yourselves against the best players in the world. And I was a winger, so I was up against the best fullbacks that are international fullbacks. So some people, it's more of the pace and the players are in the championship. You in a weird way you get less time on the ball, but it's easier to do something with that, which
Right.
is quite of a weird concept. Whereas in the Premier League, you get more time with the ball because you can earn that respect. You if you have someone passing, you have a touch. You get more time, but actually then trying to take it round someone or to make that pass or to make that shot, it's harder to do because then they block that. They know where that pass is going. Their movement, their body shape, everything's just that little bit better. So it's a bit different blend. So you have to learn that very quickly. And I think the pressures. I think being at Wolves, we were fighting relegation really the first 3 years. So you're coming up against teams where you don't have the ball. You're getting dominated. So you've got to be able to try
Oh,
and keep your shape. You've got to be able to every time you get an opportunity to break, which was my position, I had to take it. So you just get that. We say about that role and the pressures of your role in the team. My role was to create and score goals. So I had to every time I had an opportunity to do that, I had to go and exploit the other team. So that was part of my learning curve, and to actually just get used to that style of play. Because in the Championship we had more of the ball, we were attacking, whereas in the Premier League we were defending a lot more. So
right.
it's that was a huge learning curve for me in regards to actual just style of play, the opponents and what they would do. So learning visualizing, we watch videos going into games of how the team would set up, how we were going to combat that, and how we would try and actually score a goal ourselves. That was a huge learning curve for me.
Is it a different level? Like when you go from like even like the crowds, the size of the venues, you see some of these things where the Liverpool fans throw red flares at the over when Real Madrid turn up and they like I just feel like it'd be
Yeah,
so
honestly,
intimidating.
it's yeah. There's so many other sides of things that you don't even think about. Yeah, the stadiums are magnificent. The crowds are bigger. You could have like 50, 60,000 people, and it is the anthems at Anfield. Yes, as you walk out, you get tingles yourself.
Yeah.
But I actually used to enjoy that because it didn't just, inspire the players of Liverpool. It inspired like me. This was an amazing atmosphere. I thrived off that. I loved that.
Oh.
That's where some people, you could be intimidated or you could use it to your effect. And for me, as I said, I played on the wing. So if I was getting hammered by the crowd, and they were shouting this and that, I was thinking, well, I must be doing my job because they're trying to put me off. So I'm obviously playing well. So
Well.
I use that as an incentive as well. Don't get me wrong, sometimes it was a little bit more difficult than others, but the social media side of things, being in the Premier League, that magnifies everything. Media coverage, doing radio, doing any sort of interview after games is huge compared to being in the Championship. That
Yeah.
whole side of things is a massive money revenue for all sorts of outlets.
In terms of the experience as a player, when you're in that, uh, in the Premier League, like this is it. You say you want to enjoy it, which I think I can totally get that. Like you're like, oh, you finally got here, and now it's like most things like, oh my God, I got it. Now I really got to perform. Now it's like you really got to dig in. And I was listening to McTominay, I think, a Man U player, and he was talking about what it was like going from the reserves into the first team. And he said it was just like night and day. Like the standard at first team level was just insane. And I can't imagine the Manchester United academies any kind of sluggish by any standard. So it for you, like did you enjoy that? Like the real test of it? Was it really stretching that piece?
I can completely agree with what McTominay says. It's night and day. I think when you're in the 23s or the youth team, if you win, lose, or draw on a Saturday, it doesn't really affect anything. You know, if you win, lose, or draw on the weekend and you're in the first team, it's massive. You know,
Yeah.
for fans, for yourself, for the position in the league, for the club, for every, you know, players' bonuses, you know, that side of things.
Mm.
It's huge. It's massive transformation. So I can completely understand what he means. Me personally, I loved that sort of I loved that feel. I loved that pressure. I put more pressure on myself than anyone else would have done. You know,
Oh,
the expectation levels I had for myself were higher than anyone else as well. So I I I I thrived off it. I really did. It's walking out, like visualizing now, like walking back out onto that pitch with the crowd, and it's nothing that you can ever experience. And I
yeah.
think that is one of the things you miss the most. Well, I miss the most about retiring is that thrill of being out on the pitch with the crowd and having that expectations of, right, what am I going to do? How am I going to take this player on? What am I going to do with the ball? And I think that's something that I really truly enjoyed. I think if anyone had actually watched me play, they would see that every time I got the ball, I actually tried to take someone on and go past someone or do something rather than just not really, you know, try and do so. I would turn back and pass. I would actually try and 1v1, try and take someone on, and that's the thrill of playing at the top level and testing
Yeah.
yourself.
Incredible. So you moved to Wolves. You were, I think you said just before we jumped on, the highest paid, sorry, the highest fee transfer for West Ham at the time, right? When you're moving from Wolves to West Ham. And
Yeah, club record signing. Yeah.
okay, even just the way you say that, it feels a bit loaded. That, and so yeah, what's that like? Obviously, it sounds like really exciting. No doubt the press pick it up, and it's like it could be good for the ego. I would imagine. Is it? Is it like momentarily good, and then it's like, oh God, I hope this works out.
I think a bit of both. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, at the time, you know, I moved from Wolves. I went to West Ham. It was, I think, it was 12.75 million at the time.
Right.
The was club record signing. I just, when I say it like that, you sort of forget that the pressures and the expectation levels because you've moved club for a club record fee. Automatically they think you're going to be a world beater and you're going to win the league. You know, that's just what happens. You know, you think, right, I've moved from Wolves, which was a massive club, but I've then moved to West Ham, but it's in London, and everything just gets magnified in London. You
Right.
know, the press, the media coverage. You know, when I was at Wolves, we were doing media stuff and going to do different bits, but it was nowhere near as much as in London at West Ham. You'd be so many different radios, so many different papers, so many different interviews, so many different other things that you would have to do because it's just London. West Ham's got a huge history as well, same as Wolves, but it was just everything was magnified. And obviously, the West Ham fans are very passionate people. At the time, it was that they just been promoted back to the Premier League via the playoffs. So I arrived, and it was their first season back in the Premier League. I mean, we finished 10th, which was a phenomenal achievement in the first season.
Yeah.
But as we talk about, you know, it was a confidence booster for me, but I didn't really think about it at the time because at that point in time, I wanted to move and stay in the Premier League because I just played for England. I just made my international debut for England, so I was I needed to be in the Premier League to try and get myself in the England squad. So I was more concentrated on just needing to play well for West Ham, but you do subliminally start getting this if you start if the result wasn't great on the Saturday, then because you're the site club, your record signing, you get a bit more heat and you start
Oh yeah.
feeling a little bit more of that. But as I say, you know, I was my biggest critic. So if I didn't have a great game, I already knew. And then you start. My thing would be right. Then I start working harder, doing extras in training to try and improve and to try and help the following week. But absolutely, it does come with its pressures. So the following year, when Andy Carroll signed permanently and took it, it was a little bit of like a, oh, but good. It was good.
In terms of like transferable skills and what you've taken from it? Because that's what I'm really intrigued. I know like clubs spend billions of dollars. I think I was looking at the stats that the Premier League spent 1.9 billion pounds over the last 10 years on talent development, right? And that's just the reported figure, let alone what goes, individual clubs are doing more broadly, especially with their first teams. That was just purely on youth development, right?
Yeah.
So what's that process like? What are these clubs doing behind the scenes to help you navigate this, as you say, the magnification of media, the radios? Like, how do they keep you sane in this pressure cooker? Like, what can you take us behind the scenes a little bit in terms of what what these top clubs are doing?
Well, I think it's very much changed from when I started out to where it is now.
Right.
I think again, I started at Gillingham, who were in the Championship. So maybe at that point, if you were in the Premier League, you might have got a bit more sort of education on doing the media, doing a press conference, doing interviews after games with good results, with bad results, with indifferent results. There's so many outside influence, like you say about the controllables. I got told you can only control your controllables. There's so much
Yeah.
else going on. As long as you control yours, within theory, you don't have to worry about the rest of it. Because football it's such a little bubble that you're swept up in, and it's nothing. It's not. If you're not involved in people don't understand like what it's like and why everyone's like that. And it is. I always say it is like it's a bubble, and but that side of things is in education. I was on the management of the committee for the PFA, the Professional Footballers Association, for 7 years. You look at everything that they're trying to do. They come into clubs, they try and educate players on all different things. You still have to do your education in the youth team. You still have to, you get so many things on diversity. You get equality. You get talks about all sorts of the rules and regulations within sport, within betting, in sport, within what you're allowed to do, what you should do with your own social media, because that's changed massively from when I first started to now. I actually didn't have any open social media really while I was playing. I had more private, whereas now everyone has everything open. Which is great for commercial side of things and promoting yourself and extra endorsements. But on the other side of things, it's handling the abuse, I suppose, that you would receive. That side of things. So there's different educations of trying to understand how you can work well with it, but also not putting silly things out there and putting yourself, making yourself a target to rival fans or stuff like that.
So
But my education,
yeah.
go on,
I was going
my education, especially in the youth team, was I just sort of learnt because I was in the first team at 17. You get put in front of a camera. I had no experience in front of a camera at all. No one sort of said to me, so you got to sort of get thrown into it. And it was like a sink or swim moment for me, really. And I started getting used to speaking to radio, to TV. I started getting used to doing it. And then I sort of just got better at wording my answers, or basically I used to get called Tendulkar because in cricket, he was just straight down the wicket. There was nothing. He was really good. Whereas if you went out and said anything and it was just hit the bat and someone, it would have a lot of controversy. So I was the one that they sent out if we had a good result, a bad result, or an indifferent, and there's a bit of a subject that no one really wanted to talk about. I'd be the one that would go out and have to say and speak, because I would try and word it a bit diplomatically, or try and just not get the club in trouble and not say anything that would cause any foul for anyone. So I had to start developing it myself rather than get coached it. And nowadays I'm sure there's programs that go into the academies and they talk about this and how you can have role play to actually understand, well, why did you say that? Because that's going to be able to be used against you. Or you look at all of these kids, especially now that they're like 15, 16, they're not in the first team or anything, and they tweet something that's about a player, and then suddenly 5-6 years later they've made it and they're in the first team, and then this tweet gets popped up about them saying something nasty or saying something that's not quite right against this player, and then suddenly you're playing with him or against him,
Yeah.
and everyone brings it up. It's being, educated in that side of things as well.
What's it? Is there a big difference to when you're in the first team though? Like I'd imagine, let's take West Ham. Maybe I'm wrong here, but you get the impression that they've got unlimited resources, effectively, these teams in terms of commercial terms, and so they've got unlimited money to spend on whatever they want, such that you would have these huge supports and like if just you talked about a bubble, you feel like you might have bubble wrap around the bubble to support you, right? Is that what it's like in that level? Is that or not?
No, I don't think so. I don't think
Wow.
so. Obviously, you have your education. Nowadays, there is a lot more like the commercial teams, and when you go in for interviews, they're there with you to help you. And you go, no, we won't answer that question. So in some ways, that has been a massive positive. That is a big change. Because you were sort of to start with, you were sort of not left out to dry, but you were like, right, we need a player. Okay, you come, and then you'll be in front of the camera. Whereas now they have people with you, and if there's anything that they don't want you to talk about the club, or if there's anything that they ask you a question, they can jump in and go, no, he won't answer that. So you do
Right.
have a bit more of that. But I think the actual, as you say, the unlimited this and that, I don't think that's an area as such that really gets enough help, and
Wow.
especially a lot of the younger players as well, because they're thrown into the limelight. That's why, like Sir Alex Ferguson used to not let any of the young players do any interviews or do any posts or anything. He kept them like away from it until they got to a certain point, which is good and bad, because you actually as a young player, you want to be able to do that, and you want to be able to, if you've had a good win or you've scored a goal or something, you want to be able to go out and talk about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it raises your profile as well. So you've got loads of other avenues that you want to unlock or open. So it's a huge thing.
Awesome. You moved from West Ham to went to Norwich right after. Tell us about that move. What was that like being from going from a top club, say, to not necessarily a top club? I don't quite know how to phrase that, but in terms of how would you like what was that?
So Eddie
And
Norwich fans.
sorry guys. You can stop listening now. It's but in terms of what was that like as a player, or maybe how did you think about that in your career? Like when you do make these moves, like you don't get to do too many of those, right? You kind of know that it's a finite career that you've got. It's quite very short, actually. It's incredibly short.
Yes,
Um,
incredibly short.
how did you navigate that in terms of that move, and what was that like? And yeah, how
Yeah.
did you find
Well, as we say about football is like a little bubble. Like there's no other job really that, 1 minute you're with your squad of 25 players with the staff and everything, and then something happens, and then you are completely picked up and put in another bubble with another 25 people, and that's it, and like nothing's happened. There's no
it?
uh thinking about, oh, what about the family and doing this, and if you've got kids, or what about schools or anything. It's you're picked up and dropped in, and the expectation levels is just drop everything and move. And that happened to me really. I was like everyone else, I was sat watching Sky Sports News, watching the transfer deadline day, and I get a call. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. I get a call from my agent to say that Norwich want to take me on loan. Now, the reason that this was sort of brought up anyway is because the season before I'd only played about 11 games. I was the manager had changed the shape. The team wasn't doing as well. I was sort of out of the team. So a new manager had come in. I'd already spoken to him, and the season had started. So I'd played in the first 5 games of the season. So I was involved in it. But it sort of, the phone call happened. Would you want to go on loan? I had to make a decision like quickly, and I decided to go on loan, because I was one of them players that I couldn't train all week and then have nothing to train for and not be able to play on the weekend. I found it really difficult. I just wanted to play. So I'd done a full season where I'd worked hard, I'd done extras, I'd done this, but I didn't find myself playing. So I didn't want to put myself through that the following season. So I made a decision to go on loan. Now the loan was only just without a permanent. So it was, for me, it was like, yeah, I'll go there, I'll play the season, I'll come back and try and get myself back in the team. So it was a mindset of, I'm going to go there. I'm going to play football. I'm going to enjoy being back playing week in, week out. And that was my mindset. That was what I was going there for. But I had to go to my next door neighbour because my printer wasn't working. So I had to do all of the paperwork, print it off, sign it, scan it all back, send it off. And then about 10:30, all the paperwork was done. So I'd agreed the deal 10 minutes before the window closed at, I think it was about 8 o'clock or something. And then you get an extra 2 hours to finish the paperwork. So I then finished it about 10:30. And then it was like, right, well, I've got to go to Norwich. So just pack up the car, drove up to Norwich, and then I trained the next day and I played on the Saturday. It's just as quick as that. And you don't have time to worry about anything. You have to just get straight into, right, meet the manager. This is sat down, had a meeting of how he wants me to play in the role in his team, meet the players, train, and then I played straight away. Luckily for me, I actually scored on my debut and we won. So it was a good start. But you just get thrust up and put in and you just expect it to get on with it. And that's what it's like. But sometimes I actually think it's for the better because you don't have time to think because, everyone overthinks everything, even within work, you've got a job that you have to do and you overthink it and you start thinking, and then you start questioning yourself and is this right? Is this not? Whereas if you just had to go in and do it, you would just go with your instincts. You'll go with what you think was best and you went for it. And that's how football is. It's all on instinct. It's muscle memory of, when I did this one worked, so I'll do that one again. And then it didn't work, right, well, I'll try something different. But you're doing that all on the spot.
So it sounds like performance is what you're talking about, right? That ability to perform regardless of what's going on, regardless of that you've been there 5 minutes, you don't even know anyone's name, like it's like that, you're like, oh, okay, green and yellow, right? Okay, yeah, right, cool. Like it must be. It's a wild experience. So, what did that teach you around that ability to perform? Is that something which just develops where you just kind of click into gear, whatever's going on in the media? Like, is that a mindset you developed over time?
Yeah, I think it definitely is because I feel like, especially earlier on in my career, I think like if I just had to be picked up and put in a different team with all new people, I think it would take me a little while to settle in. I think that moving clubs, because I didn't move that in football terms, I actually didn't move that many times. So I was at Gillingham for 4 years. I was at Wolves for 5, West Ham for 5, and Norwich for 4. So I had long spells at clubs. So So I didn't like quickly up and move. So I sort of got used to being with the same people. And don't get me wrong, managers go all the time, but you just sort of settle yourself in a little bit, whereas you don't get that time really. So I think my experience of that benefited me in the long run. I was able to just control what I can do and my ability, and that was my role in the team, was to play on the counter or be wide, take people on, put crosses in, and that was my role. So you start to visualize, right, that is what I need to do. Don't worry about this and that. And you've moved clubs and you don't know where you're going to stay and what you're going to do with the family. And, and there's all of the outside influence. You just got to think, right, you actually got to be quite selfish and be, right, this is what I need to do. I need to focus on that. All of this at the moment doesn't matter. I need to focus on that. And I think I got better at that. And you mentally can put yourself in that position and be like, I know there's loads going on, but I just need to focus on playing. And once you're on the pitch, it's a lot easier to forget about everything else because you're so involved in, where do I need to be on corners? Where do I need to be on free kick? Am I in the wall? Am I taking them? Where am I on the pitch? So you start having to overthink actually what you're doing in football terms, and the manager's told you his tactics of where he needs you to be and what style of play. So you've got to forget the rest of it and just be solely focused on your role in that particular game.
I'm interviewing a guy tomorrow who's interviewed Gary Neville at the end of his career, looking back over, he wrote an academic paper about this interview he's done with him. And I always thought it was fascinating because the amount of thinking, which you just highlighted, which goes on in a player. And there's a story which the guy shared, and he talked about how Gary was shown some video footage of a winger, maybe you, coming down the wing.
I did play against him the two. I think it was the third or second to last game he ever played because I actually done really well against him.
And he was talking about how he was watched this footage and then he kind of like said, okay, thanks very much, walked away, started to think about the footage, and then came back to the guy who showed him the video. I'm guessing it was a coach or something like that. And then he talked about how he's like, I need to know what happened before the winger got the ball, such that he then goes on to talk about how often at the end, so like on like a Monday morning, he'd open the newspaper, read that he got a 5 out of 10 in terms of score, but he often looked back and go, well, it was one of my best games because he actually had managed to shut down or
Yeah,
use his team to shut down moves such that he didn't have actually much to do.
yeah.
Um, I was, and it was eye-opening for me in terms of the level of strategy. Right, so is that what you found, like to some degree, like your best games are actually ones where maybe you're not doing that much, or maybe it's different for your role. Maybe you're doing a lot. I don't know. How do you
Yeah.
think about it?
I, I think you're spot on when you think about it like that because my roles with regards to Gary are very different. Mine, I need to have the ball, I need to be involved in the game, otherwise I'm not effective. Whereas his is the complete opposite.
Yeah,
If you look back, so for him, he's looking at in front of him, he's making sure that the centre forwards are doing their job defensively, so they can shut off one side of the pitch. So if he's playing on the right, they keep the ball down the left, show them down that side. Then he can shuffle players over in front of him. The centre back next to him will be shuffled over, so the strikers with him. The midfielders will be shuffled over, so they're over that side. So that then, if the ball does get transferred, he can shout and scream. Communication is a skill we haven't even spoken about yet. That is huge in football. On the pitch, you could, like Gary Neville said, he could not touch the ball all game, but he's been shouting, screaming, and that's why he's then not touched the ball because he's managed to get his midfielder to shut off the line so the ball can't get played to his full to the winger.
mm,
So he doesn't receive the ball to start with. So then he doesn't have to do any work. He's shouting and screaming at this player to move there, shut that off so he can't receive the ball there and he can move forward. So the players look when he looks up, he's so tight to the to the winger that the player goes, "Oh, I won't pass it to him because he can't do anything." So you're shutting off everything, but it's all by communication. It's all by drills that you do on a training session that you'll just set up and right. If the ball's here, where are my players? Where do we need to be on the pitch? You know, and it's all by shouting and screaming and making sure that players are in their own positions in the right time. And don't get me wrong, loads of times players are out of position, but then it's about again communication of how and where, what we're going to do, and how do we all fill in? Can someone shuffle over and then someone fill in there? And it's huge. It is huge. That's why you look at the best teams in the world and they dominate possession, they dominate the ball because when the other team gets it, they've got nowhere to go because they've pressed everywhere, they've got nothing on because they're so well drilled
yeah,
that you've got to obviously have the technical ability and be a world-class player, but it's the other side of things that people don't really necessarily think that people actually concentrate and actually work on. So I can completely understand that. But if I had a good game, I needed the ball. So I needed to if he was doing that to me, I would have to find a way of receiving the ball. So I'd have to move
yeah.
or come short to them running behind, or running behind to come short to try and get a bit of space to actually get the ball.
Interesting. Let's touch on England because that's like every boyhood's dream. Like even I wanted to play for England. I didn't really play much soccer at school, like and it's such a huge deal in the UK, right? It's massive, and I often thought like I really feel for Southgate, who's the current coach, but I feel for England managers because they've got a tough gig in terms of they don't really get to see the players much, and then in the short time they've got to like perform some sort of magic. But it seems from a development perspective, what do you see at that international level? What are they doing? Like how what are they? I feel like they wouldn't be much. It's almost like there wouldn't be much more to add, maybe, but that would be an assumption. What was your experience like in terms of that development piece? How are they taking you from being a top class pro to international?
I think that's a very difficult subject to actually compare, because I think all of the players that have gone there are world class. That's why they've been
Right.
called up to international duty, and that's why they played for their countries. I think the thing that Southgate has done, which is massive kudos to him, is if you look in previous years, about you go back however long you want to, you look at the players that are actually, if we just use England as an example, you look at the amount of quality that was in there, and they played exceptionally well for their clubs. When they went to international, it didn't quite always
Yeah.
work, and that's down to if you've read or listened to anyone in past about like Rio saying there was cliques in the Man United, there was Chelsea's, there was Arsenal's, or whatever it was. I think what Southgate has done is he's nullified that at the moment. Players, when they go to international, they all get on. There's none of this England, West Ham, Man U, West Ham, whatever. There's no club rivalry once you get there. Even if you played on the weekend, you go there, it's forgotten. He's created this atmosphere where all the players get on. If you look where the media, it was always the media and then the team. Whereas again now, Southgate has created the media and the team, and everyone's sort of together. There's no big I don't know, talking points, or there's no shift. Everything's sort of together. He's very calm, Southgate, in the press. He talks very well, very diplomatic. He's also brought in a lot of the players that are playing well, which some in previous years maybe you look at and you think, well, he hasn't really played well, but because he's a legend, he's in. And I think he does do that. Don't get me wrong, he has his players that he's more favourable to. But I think he's learned, and he's built a squad that they now have the mentality to actually play tournament football. I think that's a very different skill to playing in the league. I think if
What do you
you
mean?
look at the style of play, so I'll explain. So if you in the league, you've got such a long season that each game is very important, but it's not necessarily the defining moment. So if you watch England, for instance, in the Euros and in the World Cup, the way that they play is very different. It's a bit more not defensive, but you go 1-0 up, and then it's a bit more, right, we need to calculate. We need to maybe just hold the fort and do, because you just need to get through to the group, and then you just need to get through to the qualifying. Then you just need to there's no sort of, in the Premier League, it's just, let's go for it. That's what it's like in the Premier League. Don't get me wrong, there's opportunities where you have to sit back and do it, but tournament football is very different. You have to be very calculated, very tactical. The other teams will be very, very similar. And I think that Southgate has navigated that really well. And I think that's why he wasn't necessarily, a massive success as a club manager, but he's been exceptional in the way that he's his mindset and his togetherness of a team, and the structure, the way that he's delivered that one game. And then that one game, it's not been, right, we're going to just do this for the whole season. He's changed for different games if he's needed to. I think that's the difference between a national coach and a club coach, and the same as
Interesting.
the players.
Let's change gears a little bit here, Matt. Just talk about radio and life after soccer. You're on Five Live. For those who don't know what Five Live, that was my brother's. I used to loathe my brother listening to Five Live. We always used to have it on in the car, and I'm like, oh God, it's such a boring, no offense, boring news channel. If you're not that into soccer, if you're really into soccer, it's amazing. Sky as well, you're on TV. It's high stakes. It's kind of glamorous, but I'm interested to know, like, what are some of the skills which you feel like have kind of come across well in terms of that space?
Yeah, I think if you asked my wife, it's just because I'd want to be center of attention. I think, but for me, as I mentioned about playing, there's not that thrill or that excitement of, you
Yeah,
are in front of thousands of fans. You're performing. You are a performer. You have to go out, and all these different pressures and outside influence, you go out and perform. And I think for me, if I couldn't play anymore, there was nothing that I'd rather do with actually talk about the game, or commentate on the game, and it's a completely different skill, completely different. And I've had lots of training on it, and to actually understand like the structure in the way that you answer questions is different on radio than it is on TV, and it's
Right.
different if it comes out in local, if it comes out international. So you have to structure your answers very different. So it's a massive learning curve, and it is. The nerves. Yeah, I don't feel nervous like before I'm doing it, because I'm prepped. I've done my research. Again, there's a lot of research that goes into it, because you don't want to go on into something with not knowing who this player is, or what nationality he is, or what was the result that they've just played that game and they've lost or they've won. You need to
Yeah.
know this. But if you go into it, I've done my research. I'm not nervous. You then get to about a minute before and you start feeling it, and you can still get that nerves. And I enjoy it. That's the bit that I enjoy. I like that feeling. And I think that's something that you're just trying to crave and create that you've had in the past. It's that excitement to perform, and that excitement to, you have to be on your A game. You have to do well. Otherwise, you're not going to get, in football, you weren't going to get picked the next day, your next game, you're out the team. Whereas in this, you might not get asked back to do the radio. Someone else might do it. It's such a competitive market. And I think that for me, I like to put myself in a situation that I have to perform. I think that will probably try and get the best out of me. But again, that's through many years of adapting to that. I think maybe that wasn't something that necessarily was always there with me right at the start, but I've definitely instilled that in me, and it's something that I now really thrive off, and I really use that to my advantage.
Can I touch on that a bit more? Because you mentioned it when you got let go by the academy. Forgive me, who was the academy, the initial academy who let you go?
It was Millwall.
Millwall. Okay. You still seem a little bitter about
Well,
that.
I mean, it was glad now because I played for West Ham, so it was a massive rivalry. So it was good. Everything happens for a reason, I always say.
You got let go by Millwall. You got picked up by Gillingham, and you said early on that that really hit you, and it was only because of the Gillingham team got around you that actually you were able to turn that into a positive. I'm interested in understand, what do you think's made the biggest difference? Because I think a lot of people would love to have that performance mindset, that when it matters, you can channel it and it's really positive. When you're hearing the Never Walk Alone anthems at
Yeah,
Anfield, that it G's you up rather than
yeah.
as you fall apart. What is it that other people did maybe to help that which then transferred to you, or what did you find effective, or what you've seen more
Yeah.
broadly as well, helping other players to do that?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to just pinpoint one thing. There's so many collective things that have happened to me. At being released at Millwall, I then went to Gillingham, but I moved out of home at 16. I went into dig, so you have to grow up extremely quickly. So I was living with two other players and a family, and that's in its own experience is a massive wake up call, and taking you out of your comfort zone into your own environment to somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
I was again at Gillingham. We were picked up by the academy manager every morning and dropped home every night. But we spent obviously hours after everyone else had gone because we were waiting for the manager to take up. So at that point, I started to develop like my own sort of individual, like, well, why don't I just practice while I'm here then? Using my time a bit more wisely rather than just sitting doing nothing, waiting for the manager to pick us up. So you start doing that. As a kid before that, I had that in me for individual sports. So it's very different in team sports to individual sports when you rely on yourself. So I used to love that, as I mentioned about thriving in that scenario. I knew that it was me against someone else, or me against however many in a race, in swimming or athletics. I knew, and I loved that feeling of trying to psych people out before the race had started. I would get myself in such a good mindset before that people would be like, in cross country at school, they used to say to me and the start line, right, well, we'll see you at the finish then, Jarv. Like, because I was already in their heads. I already knew what
Wow.
I was going to do, and they were already like, well, we've lost, but that was
Wow.
individual. It's very hard to transfer that into a team game because there's so many uncontrollables. But I used that to my own. So even in a game, when it was a team, I would be able to solely put myself in me against you in a 1v1, me against my fullback. So I would have that in a sort of match against someone else. And that there's so many different parts to it as the journey goes on, to be able to be actually solely focused on your mindset and how you would adapt to them situations where there's so much that's, you say about Anfield crowd and the anthems and all of that is just a part of it that you've just got to sort of move out the way, and then you can solely focus on your job in hand, which is a very hard skill to do. But I sort of mentored the younger kids at Norwich while I was injured at the time, because they were all young. They were playing in the Championship and in the Premier League, and I would used to always try and help them in regards to just solely focusing on what they were going to do on the pitch. There's so that people were coming to me, oh, I've got this and I've got that. We're like, right, okay, that's absolutely fine. We'll work on that, but when you're on the pitch, where do you need to be? Have you looked at where the centre half is? If you're playing left back, where's your centre half? Where's your winger? If the ball's going over the top, you need to, little silly things like get to the ball as quick as you can, so you've got more time to get control and turn before someone's trying to close you down. Or you play back. Are you working on your weaker foot? There's so many other areas that can get you down in football, with social media and everything that's you can't control. But if you can just work on your own mental state of psychology, I think that's huge part that's come into football. There's psychology. I started at Wolves when we had a psychologist come in, and you then start using visualization. And so for me, I took the set pieces as well. So I'd visualize being in the corner spot when you have all the fans around you, home or away fans around you. You'd visualize the weather. If is it raining, is it hot? You'd visualize your run up and where you want to put the ball, and all of these other influences that could potentially happen. And you would just repeat that. So when you got onto the pitch, it was just like, second nature. You would go on and do it because you know that the crowd were going to be there. They would be shouting and screaming. You could block that out, or you could find it funny and laugh at them, which is what I tried to do if it was an away fans, because I didn't want to let it affect me. And I tried my best. If they were shouting at me, I would try and use it in a positive, think I'm actually doing well. Otherwise they wouldn't be shouting at me.
Such a
So
powerful reframe, that, Matt. It's really,
it is,
yeah.
but it's not easy, and it's something that you have to. I sort of feel, not I was lucky, but I obviously I started at Gillingham, so the crowds weren't as big as the Premier League, so I had a bit of time to, and I did well as a youngster. So you're only getting the positive praise at that point. Like I was saying about, you've got no fears because you're just been thrown in. You're young, you're inexperienced, so you're just enjoying it, and you're just playing to your best of your ability there, and you've got no fear of doing it. It's only then when the crowds get bigger, the actual expectations levels are a lot higher, and there's so much more riding on it. I thought Gillingham was a massive wake up call for me, because if I got into the first team, it's not youth team football anymore. It means something. Players were coming in after the game, so if we didn't win or we didn't draw, they couldn't pay their mortgage at the end of the month. They needed the win bonus. They need this, and you're like,
Wow.
well, this is real. This is real. I need to track my runner back now, because he's not gonna shout at me. He's gonna do more than that to me, because we need to win. We need to get the points, and that was a big realization of, right, this is real football. This is real in life, not just this is a bit of fun. And this is what this is a lucky hobby that I'm doing. This is a job, and this is your dream, but there's so much more on it now.
You've painted a picture throughout, Matt, of like incredible resilience. I just want to touch on, mindful that we've gone a little bit over time, so you let me know if you've got a dash. Is actually the dark side piece, and which I know is an area you're really passionate about. You've done a lot of work to raise awareness around mental health in soccer or in football. When you were at Norwich, you got injured. What was that like for you?
It's an incredible side of the game, or any sport, not just football, that the outside don't really know, or not care, but they don't really understand it. So, like I was saying about, I love to just play the game. So if I wasn't playing, I'd work harder to try and get myself in the team. But when you're injured, you can't do that. So you're unable to do your job really.
Yeah.
And mentally that's extremely difficult to start with, because you're trained, it is you've been told what to do, where to be, what to bring, everything. You're militant really. You've been told, you've been drilled in that for, I was like 18, 19 years. When you can't actually do that, mentally it's extremely difficult. Physically it's demoralizing because you're in pain. I block tackled Yaya Toure and I came out worse. If anyone doesn't know Yaya Toure, he's a
Big lad.
huge boy. But I did my knee. I was out for about 10 weeks. I come back and played the rest of the season, which was about 6 months. My knee was never right. I had all sorts of injections all the way through the season, all the way through the end of the season. In these like a holiday, and then coming back pre-season, I couldn't handle it anymore. My knee was in such pain. I then went back and I went in and had exploratory surgery. My knee, the specialist who operated said, when I come around, said my medial wasn't attached properly, so that's why I wasn't able to. Yeah, well, I was sore, so I had that. I come back in 10 weeks.
Sorry, just for those who don't know, Matt, what's a medial when it comes to your knee? It sounds kind of important.
It's the inner, your inner knee, sorry, your left hand side of your knee. It's where, for instance, when you're kicking and you're whipping balls or anything, that
Oh.
bit is the like really really important. And so that I had to have it pinned in my knee. So I've still got that in now. But I got back in 10 weeks. My first training session, I cut inside shot and I got sort of smashed on my ankle. And I knew I'd done something, but because I'd been out for 10 weeks, I was desperate to just carry on. I iced it. I had scans. They said it was inflammation. So I had jabs. So I got through that whole year. I didn't play. I was just getting through training. I was trying to play in like reserve team games, but in the end, I had to say that I can't play anymore. It's too sore. So I had surgery again. I was thinking I was going to be out for 6 weeks, just did exploratory surgery and have a little bit. So basically on the scan, it showed that my cartilage was like that. And then when they went in the operation, they touched the cartilage and it all fell off. So on the scan, it just flopped back down. But when they touched it in the theatre, it all comes. So I had a hole where it was like 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, where I'm just bone on bone. So every time I was striking the ball or stopping running, it was just like hitting bone on bone. So I had what's called a microfracture, where they drill holes in the bone, it bleeds, and that sets, and that's my cartilage, which is dry blood, fibrous tissue, they call it. Anyway, I'm going through quickly. So I couldn't get myself fit for ages. I had so many more different things. I picked up what's called IT band friction syndrome. So I had surgery on that. So I was out for about 2.5 years. And
Wow.
at each point, because in football, you only concentrate on the next game. You don't look too far in front. You want to play in the next game, and then you want to play in the next game. So when you're injured, you've got like you say, right, I want to be back for that game. If it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, or 3 months, or whatever, you're like, I want to be back for that. So you have a target and you try and get there. When you don't meet that one, and something else happens, and you try and so you're constantly chasing. And because I was in pain, really, me and my wife made a decision that had my son was born, so they moved back down south so she had a bit more help, I suppose, and I would be able to try and concentrate on getting fit. So I missed out on nearly 2 years of my son growing up to try and get myself back fit. Being selfish,
Wow.
I wanted to get myself back fit. I got told by a specialist to retire. I got offered a year's pay up by Norwich, but I turned it all down because, one, I didn't want to go out when someone else was going to tell me when I was going to retire. I wanted to make that decision for myself. Two, I wanted to play football. I wanted to get back and play. And three, my wife was like, you need to have some sort of thought in, once you retire, you're going to be wanting to be able to run around and play with your kids. So you had all of these things thrown up, and it was extremely difficult. I used to go home and sort of sit on the sofa and cry really, because I was still in pain, and it was a really difficult spell for me. I was lucky that my wife and my family, and I don't think everyone sort of really realised what the sort of situation was apart from my wife, but You know, she comes from a family of talkers, which is amazing. I'm more of a closed book, but she was able to open up and get me to, you know, start talking. I think it's a massive part of you know, I think of helping yourself. I think if I knew now what I went through from the start, would I have done it? Probably not. But because you're in it and you're just chasing and chasing, you're always after the next bit and the next operation. Oh, it's only a quick one. I'll be back in 6 weeks. And then no, that was that. And then so it was like 2.5 years I didn't play for. But I finally got myself back fit. And as I mentioned about that experience and that feeling of getting back on the pitch, it was phenomenal. Walking out onto the pitch, you know, feeling the crowd, shaking hands and then playing. I got my first assist after 10 minutes. I got my second assist in the game. We lost the game, but it doesn't matter about that because it was just that feeling of getting back and I've actually done it myself and got myself back fit. And it was an extremely difficult time. But I'm able to look back on it now as a positive and being able to look at it and think I wouldn't change anything. Maybe I'd change not going in for that tackle to start with, but I would. It completely changed me as a person. It's my, you know, your outlook on everything, and I think that you know, everything happens for a reason, and that has made me realize what my body can and can't do, what things are important, and I think that now I look back at that and I can help other people that are going through similar things. You know, I've had 4 operations in 3 years. I had to have another clean up on my ankle after that as well. So it's an experience, but it's one that I look back on and think, well, I gave it absolutely everything I possibly could to get myself back fit, and I did get myself back fit, and I played again for another year and a bit, and then I called time on my career by myself, and that was something that I sort of wanted to do. Really, I didn't want it to be someone take that away from me and me not have that decision myself.
Wow, that's a really epic story, actually. Like, in terms of like, the I think the perseverance or the determination which comes through there, right? I'm gonna get through this is, yeah, I think, and there's points in there. I've been through depression myself, and it's dark. It gets really dark in there, and it's amazing. Your wife deserves a medal for putting up with your selfishness.
Don't tell her that.
If she's listening in the background.
Yeah.
It's yeah, a phenomenal, and I think it's a dark side of the sport, right? In terms of injury, I know in life as well. Like, it's hard when I've been injured. I've pulled a hamstring recently, and it's like it can really throw you off your canter. You know what I mean? And that's
Well,
when,
for me, it's been part of my whole life. You know, that routine of playing. Like, even now, if I'm sort of stressed or the kids are, you know, going wild, it's I need to go in the gym and have that release, because that is my thing. That's what I've done for 20 odd years. I need that sort of, not fix, but I need that adrenaline. I need that going in the gym and doing something, and that because that's been part of my makeup for forever. And I think I haven't even touched on social media in that when I talk about my time at Norwich and being injured and going through that. You know, you're getting pelters for being injured. You're getting this, you're getting that, but no one actually realizes what you're going through. They show, oh, he's injured again. Oh, he's done something else, and he's done this. But you know, it's that whole repetitive. You know, all your muscles decrease. You know, if you've ever had a long-term injury, your muscles go like a granny leg. You know, you've got no muscle in, and you've got to build all that up again, and then you have another one, you lose it again, you can build it all up. All my operations are on my right leg, so it's like a constant battle to. And even now, if I don't do anything for a while, you can see the difference in my legs, because my right one, the muscle just goes a bit quicker than my left. So it's like it's all the stuff that you just don't even ever think about, and that monotonous of doing the same thing every day but not being able to do your actual job, of being in the gym looking out on training, because the gyms are always looking out onto the training pitch, so you're looking at everyone else training and you're sat there, you know, on crutches or doing something, and you're just that is depressing in itself, let alone not being able to actually do it. So yeah,
I can imagine.
it's a minefield.
Oh, it's super demoralizing. Matt, thank you. I feel like we could keep talking, but we won't. Let's pause here. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat to us. It's been awesome. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate your openness, your honesty, and also the behind the scenes, like the reality of what it's really like. Sounds super exhilarating. I can't imagine what it's like walking out, you know,
Yeah.
60,000 scousers just screaming at you. Like it would be like petrifying and
Uh,
exhilarating. So,
yeah,
Matt,
it's
thanks.
amazing.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Good on you, mate.
Thank you very much.